This is your Bible Geeks Daily Download into the book, Matthew chapters 19 through 23. Growing up, most teenagers excitedly prepare for one of the most impactful tests of their lives, the driving test. Someday, hopefully, they'll become skilled and responsible drivers. But as any fearful parent knows, they don't always start out that way. In this week's readings, we find Jesus masterfully passing multiple tests, while the religious leaders, and even sometimes his disciples, seem to fail at every turn.
First, we find some tests on the road. On Monday in Matthew 19, the Pharisees test Jesus with a controversial question about divorce. Then we find the disciples preventing parents from bringing their children to see Jesus. And a rich young man asks Jesus to point out what he's missing.
And then on Tuesday in Matthew chapter 20, Jesus shares a powerful parable about equity after Peter wonders what they'll receive for giving up everything. And then, misunderstanding the kingdom's true nature, James and John's mom awkwardly asks Jesus if her sons can have powerful positions someday. And then along the road outside Jericho, the crowd tried to keep two blind men from bothering Jesus with their cries for healing.
How does the Lord's teaching on divorce affect the importance you place on your marriage covenant?
And would you have prevented those parents from bringing their children to Jesus, or the blind men from being healed?
Next, Jesus faces tests in the city. On Wednesday in Matthew 21, Jesus sends two disciples into Jerusalem to fulfill Zechariah's prophecy, entering the city on a donkey while the people shout his praises. He comes to the temple to put the religious leaders to the test, asking them to state their position on John's baptism. And after two thinly veiled parables about an obedient son and some murderous vineyard keepers, the religious leaders are ready to arrest him.
Then on Thursday in Matthew 22, Jesus tells a story about how some will accept the invitation to the wedding feast, while others reject it. He faces three attempts to trap him in his words with questions about taxes, the resurrection, and the greatest commandment. But he finally silences their barrage of questions when he asks whose son is the Christ in Matthew 22 verses 41 through 46.
Why do you think the crowds went from celebrating Jesus as he entered the city to shouting "Crucify him" days later at his trial?
And what do you learn from Jesus about responding to probing questions?
But the Pharisees have failed the test. On Friday, in Matthew 23, Jesus points out the total failure of the scribes and Pharisees, pronouncing 7 woes on them for their hypocrisy and unrighteousness. He calls them blind fools, children of hell, and a brood of vipers. And the week closes with Christ's lament over the city of Jerusalem, wishing he could bring them together in safety despite their stubborn rejection.
How would you have felt to hear those woes from Jesus about you?
And in what ways do you struggle with the same failures as the Pharisees did?
So let's follow along with the Lord's tests this week as we read Matthew chapters 19 through 23, and may the Lord bless you and keep you today.
Shalom.